Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. There's a new game we like to play. You see, a game with no added sovereignty. You treat me to a vote that puts me on my knees. You call it master and servant. We call it Alex and Salmond with his sort of independence who needs servitude. Hey, Alex, why be yet another nation on the chain gang when you can be the first on the blockchain? Stacy?
Yes, well, Max, this is the talk of town here, is this Scottish vote for independence coming up September 18th. And everybody is very concerned about it. And it's back in the news because Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS, threatened to leave Scotland and join the City of London should the Scots vote for independence. Apparently, they think that's a good threat, but I would think that the debts of RBS are a ball and chain on the Scottish nation, any new Scottish nation. The first headline reads, "Scotland will never be free as long as it has RBS."
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that RBS took this position because, first of all, RBS is already in the City of London. RBS doesn't represent anybody in Scotland. RBS is already here in the City of London, and they are engaging in what the banks on the City of London do. RBS, Lloyds, Barclays, and the other one.
HSBC.
HSBC. I know there's four horsemen of the banking apocalypse. They're already committing. Who wants them? Why would Scotland want RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland? I mean, it's a joke. It's like these bankers threatening to go to Switzerland if any regulations are imposed on them. Just go. We can drive you to the airport. Just get out.
Well, it could be just, psyops. They're pretending that they might want it in Scotland so that Vince Cable, for example, was like, yeah, we'll take RBS here and stuff the English voters and taxpayers with all those mammoth amounts of debts. We don't know what the black hole of debts. There hasn't been an actual day of reckoning yet in the global financial system. We don't actually know how many fraudulent debts there are. But the other thing is, Alex Salmond, with his vote for independence, what he thinks the Scottish people should do is stay in the sterling union, keep the British pound, and the Bank of England. The Bank of England would continue to be the lender of last resort to Scottish financial institutions. Other central banks would be tapped as well if need be. Quote, banks receive lender of last resort facilities from across the world, and it is normal for countries to act in a coordinated way to secure financial stability. The blueprint that Alex Salmond wrote says, for example, the RBS and Barclays received significant liquidity support from the U.S. Federal Reserve at the height of the financial crisis. With independence like this, who needs servitude?
Right, well, Alex Salmond is economically illiterate. And, well, it goes back to this idea of RBS and who would want RBS. And they have an enormous amount of debt on their books. But, of course, in the banking world, debts are considered assets.
Yeah.
And assets to the extent that they are constantly in need of refinancing by the likes of the central banks. And Alex Salmond makes another boner of a mistake here by saying, well, the central banks are the lender of last resort. No, the central banks are the buyer of bad debt of first order. They're no longer functioning as they were designed to be a cushion. They're now operating as a primary instigator in a fraud or a Ponzi scheme. And just to repeat on this point a little bit, the income that is associated with servicing the bad debt in the City of London, yes, RBS is an asset because it's an enormously over-indebted, insolvent institution that has no real justification to be allowed to continue.
To put that into context, Royal Bank of Scotland's assets are $1.1 trillion. Alex Salmond thinks that the GDP of an independent Scotland for the first year would be $245 billion. So they say the assets are 1.1 trillion of RBS, and therefore they wouldn't be able to bail it out. But the thing is, like, why would you want to be part of the city? Why would you want to be beholden to the Bank of England? You'd end up being like Greece to, the UK, Germany, because the fraud all comes from here. So you're never going to, why not just put the whole nation on the blockchain? Set up the parameters, everybody agree to the parameters, have a fair launch of a nation where everybody has a say and knows exactly what, because they could look at the public ledger to see what is expected and who owes what.
This is what Iceland is doing. a group in Iceland is creating a cryptocurrency, the Aurora coin, and they're pre-mining it and distributing Well, you don't like that?
Yeah. No, I don't think that's true because that's an individual. I think this is a nation. Here they go on September 18th. Every single Scot goes to the poll. They're voting. If they vote for independence, they get independence.
But you're saying it's not independence because they don't have an independent banking system. They're beholden to the Bank of England, and they're going to treat RBS as an asset when it's in fact a huge liability. It's not, what Alex Salmond wants is another layer of bureaucracy so that he can get a salary and a bunch of bureaucrats can get salaries. That's not independence. Independence would mean you have your own bank, your own currency, it's not as he describes it. He's not talking about independence. He's talking about independence from having to get a real job. That's what Alex Salmond is talking about.
But I want to bring it back to this notion of a blockchain, Max, because here they're almost out of North Sea oil, so they're going to have to compete as a small nation of 5 million people, equal to Norway and Singapore. They're going to compete with Singapore because they're almost out of oil, right? So they have to go into financial services. Financial services is we're at the end game of that. Why compete with that? Why join the Bank of England? Why fight for RBS? Why not start from the beginning? Because we have a new financial system out there. We have a new payment system. We have a new currency grid. We have a new potential to be the very first crypto nation. They could put it all onto the blockchain. They could put the vote. They could put the political elections. They could put the banking system. They could put everything. They could put their legal system on the blockchain so that it's fraud-free economy. It's a fraud-free political system. That's something new. That's something that people will want to be involved in.
Right, but getting back to my Iceland kind of example there, so people in Iceland and individuals in Iceland want to create a Aurora coin, which is pre-mined and distributed to the entire population of Iceland to give them a stake in this new crypto economy. You also have the Lakota tribe in America is creating the Maza coin, which is a crypto coin dedicated to that nation who's been the subject of all kinds of transgressions over the 300 years. So why not Scotland get in on the crypto ground floor and be part of the 21st century and build an economy on the blockchain, as you point out.
I'm saying more than just the currency, more than just the sterling, more than whatever they might want to call it, Robert the Bruce coin, who knows? But I'm saying like the actual legal system, the actual political system, the actual postal system, the actual contractual system, all of that stuff on the blockchain, so there is none of this.
Well, most people don't understand that behind the cryptocurrency is something called the blockchain, which is the accounting system, the public ledger as it's called, to make sure that all transactions are fully transparent and completely up to speed. So you're saying is that another application for that is you can take all your legal documents and all of your founding documents and all of your bureaucratic necessities, constitutions, and you can embed them onto this public ledger, and you could have a head start on developing an economy that would be extremely light in terms of bureaucracy. Of course, Alex Salmond is a pro-bureaucracy. You're arguing you couldn't give an argument that he would be more against, because Alex Salmond is pro-bureaucracy. The more bureaucracy, the better. The blockchain is, or a cryptocurrency is, the less bureaucracy, the better. The two are diametrically opposed.
Right now, Alex Salmond wants to maintain his relationship with the Bank of England and rely on the Bank of England to be the lender of last resort. So I want to turn to this headline about the Bank of England, yet again in the news for their role in participating, enabling, and abetting corruption. Bank of England staff said to have condoned currency traders' conduct. Bank of England officials told currency traders it wasn't improper to share impending customer orders with counterparts at other firms, a practice at the heart of a widening probe into alleged market manipulation, according to a person who has seen notes turned over to regulators. This is regarding an April 2012 meeting by some Forex traders and the Bank of England, and apparently the notes taken were suggesting that the Bank of England said it was okay for them to basically manipulate and front run and illegally trade on insider information.
Right. Well, this is what I'm saying about these central banks now. Is they started off as, quote, lenders of last resort, which means they have a somewhat arm's length relationship with the banks that they're servicing, and if need, they can come in and provide liquidity on an ad hoc basis. But that's no longer the case. Now they, as we're pointing out here, the Bank of England, because they are the enablers and facilitators of first order in massive bank fraud, not only do they provide this cheap money that is stolen essentially from savers, but they also engage in market manipulation, Forex manipulation, LIBOR manipulation, as was pointed out a year ago, or 18 months ago, when the LIBOR scandal broke. It was clear that the Bank of England under Mervyn King was participating in fraud in the LIBOR scandal. And I remember going on BBC and making this declarative statement unequivocally that Bank of England is involved in LIBOR fraud. And of course, the other panelists were saying, no, that's impossible. How can you say such a thing? Now the proof comes out, yes, Bank of England is involved in LIBOR fraud, Forex fraud, energy market fraud, bank fraud, RBS fraud, HSBC fraud. Of course, they're involved in all these frauds.
Actually, they bring this up in this article because, as you say, the Bank of England was allegedly involved. I think it was Paul Tucker at that point had said to, he had suggested to these banks that they do this in order to make it look healthier, the system look healthier here. Now, they say that traders representing some of the world's biggest banks told officials at the meeting in April 2012 that they shared information about aggregate orders before currency benchmarks were set, 3 people with knowledge of the discussion said. The officials said there wasn't a policy on such communications and that the bank should make their own rules, according to the people. The notes could drag the UK central bank into another market rigging scandal 2 years after it was criticized by lawmakers for failing to act on warnings that LIBOR was vulnerable to abuse. Now, of course, because the Bank of England's role in this scandal as well, which is a bigger scandal than LIBOR because LIBOR is a $380 trillion market, Forex is a $5 trillion per day market. So here, the regulators, the top officials of the financial system, the monetary system, are involved in manipulating money, the value of money, so, or at least condoning it. So, of course, they're going to get out of jail free card.
This is a so-called problem of moral hazard. When you don't prosecute fraud in the banking system, it's an open invitation to double down and increase more fraud. Because Bank of England was never prosecuted for their LIBOR rigging 2 years ago, they decided to double down and get involved in Forex rigging. And of course, there's no prosecution now. They'll get involved in some other much more scandalous market rigging going forward. If there's no deterrent, if there's no prosecution, if there's no rule of law, then there's no reason why Mark Carney should obey the law and should engage in more massive fraud.
Well, he wasn't there, I don't think, when this thing happened. But the thing is that there's been...
Of course he's not there. Mervyn King was there. But, okay, he inherits Mervyn King's mess. Did he come out and say, I'm now the new governor of the Bank of England, and by the way, Mervyn King committed fraud, and we want to clean up the fraud and do what Iceland did? Get rid of the bankers that are committing fraud? No.
And this is what Scotland should do with their independence.
There you have it. Well, we got to go. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Stay tuned for the second half. A whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to Dominic Frisby, author of Life After the State. His most recent piece, published at The Independent, is called Why an Independent Scotland Could Become the Richest Country on Earth. Dominic, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Thank you very much, Max. Pleasure to be here.
Great title. Why an independent Scotland could become the richest country on Earth. Talk about it.
Well, when I was writing my book, I was no end of research, and one of the things I research is which are the richest nations in the world on a per capita basis. And every year, the IMF and the CIA and the World Bank each publish a list of those countries. This is measured on a per capita, GDP per capita basis, adjusted for currency, PPP adjusted. And in first place is Qatar, in second place is Luxembourg, and then you have the likes of Switzerland, Norway, Singapore, Hong Kong, if that counts as a country, is on that list, and so on. Now, some of these countries, Brunei is another one. Now, some of these countries have got rich because of their oil. But in that case, why isn't Saudi Arabia on the list? Or why isn't Russia on the list? Or Venezuela? Saudi Arabia, by the way, is 28th. So some of these countries have got there because of their oil. Some of the countries have got on their list because they have favourable legislation, regulation, which means people either want to base themselves there or operate out of there. They're very tax-friendly. But these are all legislative and regulatory options that are available to other countries in the world. They just haven't been adopted. But the one thing all those countries on that list have in common is that they're small. They all have populations. I think Switzerland is 7 or 8 million, and apart from that, all the other countries on that list are below 5 million, with the exception of the United States, which is in about 7th or 8th position. The United States is obviously large, but once upon a time, in 1950 and 1970, the United States topped that list. And As its state has grown and its government has become more centralised, in the 1950s and the 70s, the states were more autonomous, the individual states, I mean, and its money was independent, it was tied to gold. But as it's centralised its money to government, coming off the gold standard, and its state has grown, everything has become more centralised, the United States has slid.
Dominic, is this all heading to Scotland in some way?
Yes, it
because
is.
I'm sitting here waiting for the point. Scotland is supposed to be the richest.
I need
What's
to
going
outline
on?
the thing. So here's the point. Scotland has the oil. It's small. Its population is just less than 5 million, and it has the same it has the opportunity to install the same regulatory and legislative to take up those same options that, say, I don't know, Singapore or whatever, Switzerland. It has the opportunity to enact that same. It has an opportunity now to follow that blueprint.
Okay,
so it has the triple. No other country in the world has the triple: the oil, the regulatory options, and the fact that it's small. And if you look at the tradition in Scotland, sorry to talk over you, it's got a long tradition. I'm about the only person in the history of man that's ever achieved that. Scotland has a huge history in finance and banking. And so, you know, it's got the triple.
Okay, so a country like Qatar, we always hear about, they have a huge GDP per capita because they've got a lot of oil wealth. And it's something like 100,000 euros per person or something.
Norway as well.
Norway.
Yeah.
What's the breakdown with Scotland?
I don't know what oil barrels per person are, and it doesn't have the same amount of oil that Norway does, and the proceeds of that oil have been blown, and they haven't been invested in the way that Norway invested them. But there is still oil there.
But this would seem like a great pitch to the people of Scotland. Like, hey, you could have the highest GDP per capita in the world. How come that's not being used? It seems like Alex Salmond, who runs Scotland, is saying, like, we could become the most mangled bureaucracy in the world.
Yeah,
it's just more bureaucracy. They want to keep the pound. They want to keep the Bank of England. They just want to create a bunch of bureaucratic jobs.
Keeping the pound is the dumbest decision that Scotland will make. It will be exactly the same dynamic that Southern Europe, that Greece faces. You will have interest rates set in Westminster that suit London and England, in the same way that interest rates are set in Brussels that suit Germany, and then in the process, Greece or Spain have been absolutely annihilated by that, and the same thing could happen to Scotland. If it's going to be independent, be independent. Don't do this kind of third way BS.
Right, so I don't get how they can, well, they're going to, if they vote for independence under the current scheme, it's going to be worse than ever.
I think so.
Right, if they vote for independence under a genuinely independent...
Yeah, they have to learn to live off their tax base as well. That's another key factor.
You know, they've got this enormous bank there, Royal Bank of Scotland. They threatened to leave, but wouldn't that be great for
Best
Scotland?
thing that can happen. The model here is Iceland. Iceland is the country that let its banks go bust.
Right.
And that's what we should have done, in my opinion. Get rid of all that fraud. You know, Mother Nature is a very effective regulator. It's called bankruptcy. And you know, I mean, forget RBS. The other opportunity about the pound is it's pretty obvious to anyone that's used cryptocurrencies, whether it's Bitcoin or whatever currency it is. It's pretty obvious that the technology of electronic cash is infinitely superior to the, you know, it just totally frees up exchange and commerce and so on. And
Right,
it's
so
pretty
why
obvious that that is the way that money is going. So here is Scotland with the opportunity to be the trailblazer and the first government to issue its own cryptocurrency. Well, Iceland's already doing that now, but you know, it's so obvious. I just can't see why they don't see it.
Yeah, well, talk about cryptocurrencies, because your next book, in fact, is going to be about Bitcoin and the history of Bitcoin. Your first book, the Life After the State, of course, was crowdfunded.
Yeah.
So you're using alternative financial mechanisms, and now you've got your next book, which is on Bitcoin, which I believe there's another chapter, a huge chapter in there on Maxcoin.
Massive. It's even bigger than the chapter on Bitcoin.
Well, you said a year ago that we should create...
I did. I'm all for freely competing currencies, and I suggested to you the Keiser dollar, and you've changed it to the Maxcoin.
Well, it's the Maxcoin, and it's a raging success. Market cap is exploding. People are using it, and it's making a huge run up the crypto charts. But getting back to Scotland for a second, I mean, of course, I would love them to use the Maxcoin because Maxwell, my middle name, comes from my Caverlock Castle, which at one point my clan ran.
That's good. And here's another irony. The Bank of England was founded by a Scot.
Well, Adam Smith was a Scot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they have it in their bones.
Yeah, they have it in their bones. Evidence of history is overwhelming. Look at the city-states of Italy. The city-states of Italy produced some of the greatest individuals that ever lived. And then after unification in the 19th century, Italy has just been a disaster of infighting, of bureaucracy and mafia and Camorra, whatever you like. Scotland, when it was kind of semi-autonomous in the 19th century, produced some of the greatest people that ever lived. Adam Smith was earlier, but look at the Scottish contribution to invention, for example. James Watt, Logie Baird, amazing person after amazing person. And the Scottish contribution to mankind in the second half of the 20th century hasn't been on the same scale. And it's because it's been burdened with this state, and it needs to free itself. You cannot doubt the talent of the Scottish people, but they need the right environment in which to thrive, and that is independent not only of the UK, but independent of a burdensome, overwhelming, oppressive state.
Yeah, you mentioned Iceland, and it's an individual within Iceland that's starting the Aurora coin, and they're going to pre-mine it and distribute it really against the government wishes. They're taking an incredibly aggressive stance.
Okay.
Yes, so it's a bit of a revolution. It's a crypto revolution. In America, the Lakota Nation, the Indians, American Indians, the indigenous people, have been subjected to 300 years of subjugation. They are creating their own cryptocurrency.
We need to start Jock Coin.
Who?
Jock, Scotland. We need to start Scot Coin.
What would you call it? Jocks?
Jock's a kind of informal way of calling Scots.
How do you spell that?
J-O-C-K.
J-O-C-K.
I realise that means a different thing to Americans.
Yeah, in America, the jock is a
underwear,
sportsman, or it's also a cup that you wear when you're playing sports, a protective cup to make sure you're protecting the family jewels, as they say.
Maybe in the interests of the broader market, we won't call it Jock Coin in that case.
But conceivably, given the talent there, they could, under the radar of the government, under the radar of the UK, simply create a cryptocurrency right now.
Well, somebody entrepreneurial should do it.
Nobody stops them.
No.
And if people start using it, then they've got their independence, no matter what Alex Salmond, the bureaucrat, says.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about...
Once you're free of money, once you've got your money free of the state, the state is toast.
Well, it's a good point, because as the Baron von Rothschild, going back 100, 200 years, said, if you control the money, you control the people, essentially.
Yeah.
And you can flip that around and say, if we're the people, if we control our money, then the state can wither and die. We don't care.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what about the blockchain itself? Because a cryptocurrency, of course, is more than a means of exchange. It's more than a currency. It's an actual public ledger system.
Yeah.
Where your new book, which you're working on now, I'm sure will go into detail on this. But it gives a way for a state or a society to administer the functions that are normally taken up by bureaucrats like Alex Salmond, could be disintermediated, to use one of these phrases that is popular amongst the high-tech community, and huge cost efficiencies, because all those contract law, property law, it's all on this very visible blockchain.
Yeah.
You got the Ethereum project, which is a new kind of colored coin project where you're assigning valuations to individual coins. Again, huge benefit for Scotland. So in other words, it's not a problem that they've been under the rule of the corrupt City of London for all this time. It's an opportunity.
It's the opportunity, not just of a generation, but of a century or more. And if they don't, please take it.
Because their aspirations are intersecting with cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Which is...
there's a real confluence of factors. The tides are all... The tailwinds are behind them.
How do we get these jocks to wake up to this? Do we have to go up there to Edinburgh and have a special...
Let's go and shout. We'll
go have an open forum?
Yeah, I think so.
Now let's talk about Norway for a second, because Norway, of course, you compare that with the UK and the oil wealth, because you mentioned that the part of the equation, the triple play of Scotland is the oil, the other two things you mentioned, which I've already forgotten.
Oil, size, regulatory options.
The size, oil, regulatory.
Norway has the size and the oil, the regulatory options, a bit dicey. Very large state in Norway.
Right, huge state. But they have managed to put together a sovereign wealth fund, one of the biggest in the world, hundreds and hundreds of billions. And of course, the public benefits from this.
Isn't each Norwegian now a millionaire?
I think so.
Yeah.
Now in the UK, which also had access to the North Sea oil, going back to the Thatcher years, they took that money, instead of putting it into a sovereign wealth fund, have created one of the most indebted states of the past 50 years. All the debt inclusive in the UK, it's 10 times GDP. There's no so instead of having $1 million per population per capita here in the UK, it's more like 50,000 pounds of debt per capita.
I think per working person, we owe £40,000 per working person.
So Scotland should say, you know what? We don't want the Bank of
keep
England.
your debts, mate.
We don't want the keep your debts, mate. We want the jock.
Yeah.
It's cryptocurrency and go totally independent. All right, so this new book, which is all about the Max coin, from what I understand.
I'm going to announce
Bitcoin
it now.
is passé. Bitcoin is last year, so 2013. Max coin is 2014.
Well,
it's zipping up the crypto charts. I think it's got a chance to hit $50 million in valuation.
I promise you will get a very good plug in the book. If not, I mean, it's part of the growing evolution of cryptocurrencies.
All right, so we got about 20 seconds left. Dominic, take it away. 20 seconds to go here.
Okay, so I'm writing this book on Bitcoin. It is hopefully the first book on Bitcoins by a recognized publisher. It's called Bitcoin, the Future of Money. I'm crowdfunding it. If you want more information, go to my website, dominicfrisby.com, or type in Unbound, which is the publishing company, Unbound Frisby Bitcoin, and you will find it.
/MaxCoin. All right, Dominic Frisby, thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you very much, Max. It's been my pleasure.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Dominic Frisby, resident Goldbug at Money Week and Bitcoin, MaxCoin genius, author of Life After the State. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.